sketch the graph of y equals 2 to the x power. Now to graph this, and in the past when we've graphed, it's mostly been linear equations or linear inequalities. So we're used to just being able to plot 2 points and being able to draw a line through them. Well, a graph like this, a graph of an exponential function, it's not going to be a straight line. So what we need to do is plot multiple points to get an idea of how the graph's going to look. So let's make a t-chart, and then we'll start figuring out what some of our points are going to be. So we have an x and a y t-chart, and let's just start putting in, well, let's do 6 points and see if that's good enough to figure out what it's going to look like. So if x is -2, let's say x is -2, well then the function becomes y equals 2 to the -2 power, which is going to be the same thing as y equals 1 over 2 squared. Because remember, a negative exponent tells you to write the reciprocal and then change the sign of the exponent. So we have 1 over 2 squared, which is 1 over 4. So y equals 1/4. 1/4. And we can plot that on our graph here. So let's make each two sections be worth 1 unit. So each 2 sections are 1 unit. So we have -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, -8. And then on the vertical, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that's probably good enough. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so our first point here is -2 and 1/4. So you go -2 in the x direction, and then 1/4, which will be right about there. So that's -2 and 1/4. Okay, next point, let's try -1 for x. What happens when x is -1? Well, it'll become y equals 2 to the -1 power, which is the same thing as 1 over 2 to the 1 power, which is the same thing as 1/2. So when x is -1, y is 1/2. So that'll be, when x is -1, y is 1/2, which is right there. -1 and 1/2. Okay, what happens when x is 0? Well, when x is 0, we have y equals 2 to the 0 power. And anything raised to the 0 power, as long as the base isn't 0, is going to be 1. So 2 to the 0 power is 1. So when x is 0, y is 1. So it'd go right there at 0 and 1. Okay, now the next one. What happens when x is 1? Well, when x is 1, it becomes y equals 2 to the 1, 2 to the first power, which is 2. So let's plot 1 and 2 is right there. That's 1 and 2. Okay, when x is 2, what is y going to be? Well, when it's going to be y equals 2 squared, which is 4. So it'll be 2 and 4 right there. So 2 and 4. Okay, let's just do a couple more, just so I think we're starting to see a curve here. But let's do 3. What happens when x is 3? Well, it's going to be y equals 2 to the third power, which is 2 times 2 times 2. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So y is going to equal 8. So we'll have 3 and 8. So it's starting to really go up. Now, if we want to start connecting these dots, we can do that, and we'll connect them with a curved line like this. And that's not perfect, but you'll get the idea. And you'll notice the farther negative that x is, the closer to 0 y is going to get. But it'll never equal 0, because when you look at the exponent, I mean, just for example, what if x was negative 100? If x is negative 100, what would y equal? Well, y equals 2 to the negative 100. And that's just going to be 1 over 2 to the 100th power. And that's going to be a really big number. So it's going to equal 1 over a really, really big number. And 1 over a really big number is actually a really small number. So 1 over a really big number is a really small number, but it's not going to be 0. It's going to be a little bit more than 0. So the larger in the negative direction x goes, so the farther to the left on your graph you go, the closer to 0 this function is going to get, but it'll never reach 0. So I hope this gives you an idea. And the same thing happens when you go farther on the right. The farther right you go, the larger the function goes, and pretty soon it'll look like the function's just going straight up. But this is how you're gonna graph your exponential functions. You're just gonna have to plot some points and see what the curve looks like.